as Coach Mac on TGP, but tell us about Dave Mencarini.
Well, that's kind of why I wanted to do this video stuff, is just to kind of tell my story, because I think my story can be really beneficial for a lot of people. My transition to where I am today versus the last 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, I think can inspire people. It can also help people realize that something bad could happen in your life and there's ways to come back from it. You know, I feel like this is more for other people, but it's also for myself too, because it's helping me continue to grow and move forward, you know, at my young age.
At your very young age, yes. So walk us through the journey. What did you do before real estate?
Yeah, so well, ever since I was a little kid, I knew what I wanted to do. My dad was, and still is, my hero. And my dad was a teacher and a football coach. He taught for 35 years, and he was a coach for 50 years, 50. And so when I was a little kid, I would just pal around with my dad and go to practices and off-season workouts. And I mean, I basically grew up in a locker room. It's what I didn't know any difference, what my dad did. And so I wanted to be around him all the time. And so I knew early on what I wanted to do. And so as I transitioned through college, got into teaching and coaching. Started teaching and coaching in Montgomery County Public Schools in 1998. And kind of went on this journey through a couple different schools. Started teaching elementary school, 5th grade. Yeah, 5th grade. And then I taught 7th and 8th grade math, which was crazy because middle school kids are, you know, what they are. But and then I ended up, you know, kind of really spent a majority of my career teaching at Quince Orchard High School and coaching football there. I became the head coach there in 2004. And kind of my life from 2004 to 2016 just kind of was this one big, you know, that initial climb of a roller coaster, that big hill. You know, you're climbing. And, you know, I was able to do some really cool things and through football. And it allowed me to experience a ton of things that people that love sports will probably think were cool. I thought it was super cool. And, you know, along the way there were obviously ups and downs, but, you know, the silly sport of football was so good to me. It has given me so many relationships that still exist that are important to me in my life. And it allowed me to accomplish things individually and as a program that, you know, I'm really proud of. And it allowed me to take my career and then take it to even another level at the collegiate level, where I was able to, in 2016, get a job at the University of Maryland, which was a dream come true. My parents went to Maryland. I wasn't smart enough to get into Maryland or good enough to play there. But it was an opportunity that I kind of couldn't say no to have an opportunity to go. And at my age, you know, I was in my early 40s. And to go from teaching high school to Maryland at that age, you know, it's kind of unheard of. So I knew it was risky. And it was something that, you know, I just felt like I couldn't say no to. So I was able to do that for 3 years. I was there from 2016 to 2019.
So how would you say the transition from essentially your dream job to something that you had no idea what it was going to be like, starting completely over halfway through your life?
Mm-hmm.
Walk me through what that did to you mentally and what that journey was like.
Yeah, so as high as the mountaintop was for me, you know, being the director of player personnel at the University of Maryland, which was incredible. Got to do so many cool things and see so many cool places and meet a lot of really cool people. As I quickly learned, the college athletics is a major business. and it's very volatile. And the coach that hired me was terminated pretty early on in my tenure at Maryland, and a new coach came in. And anytime there's a regime change at that level, usually kind of everyone just has to go find a new job, and the new coach brings his own people in. He kept me. He kept me in 2019. He kept me for the first year, and then brought me in at the end of 2019 and said, look, I'm not going to renew your deal. I'm going to go in a different direction. We're going to pay you through the remainder of your contract, and we're going to let you go. And I was, yeah, right, yeah, not knowing COVID was coming. This was in November of 2019. So, although it was a shock, it was the first time that I had to change jobs, not by my own choice. Any decision I've ever made and where I wanted to teach or coach, it was done by my decision. This was forced upon me. So my natural reaction was just to return to teaching and coaching. It's what I've always done. It's what I knew, had made a pretty good reputation for myself. And so I reapplied to teach and coach in Montgomery County in January of 2020. And it was hard, trying to get a job in the middle of a school year is difficult. Not a lot of full-time jobs are open mid-year. So I was actually planning on just being a substitute teacher from January until the end of the school year, till a full-time teaching position became available. And then the pandemic hit. And for the first time in my life, I was out of work during a pandemic. My oldest daughter was a senior in high school. I'm used to working. I'm used to being busy. And I went from an extremely fast-paced lifestyle to sitting on my couch.
So what do you think got you up and looking into real estate?
Yeah.
Specifically, why TGP?
So my journey to joining this team is really interesting because when I got let go at Maryland, my wife and I had always had a plan that when both our girls graduated high school, we were going to sell our house where we had built and raised our kids in, and we were going to downsize. We didn't need the house that we had once the girls moved out. And ironically, I had said to my wife in January, hey, we ought to think about this just in case my job search takes a little longer. Like, this wasn't about the pandemic because no one knew the pandemic was coming. This was just about my house was my biggest asset, but it was also my biggest expense. And my thought process was, I have a wife and 2 children and my wife's a full-time employee also, but they're used to a certain lifestyle, and I didn't want to have to put that in jeopardy. So through a mutual friend, I ended up meeting with Dan Chabowski, our team lead, and we sat and had lunch together over at BJ's by Frederick Mall, and sat there with Dan and Tim Draves and our mutual friend, and they tried to convince me for about 2.5 hours to get into real estate. And I appreciated them looking out for me and wanting to help me. And I knew I was going to list my house with Troyce Gatewood Partners. And Dan got our house. We got our house ready. We sold it. The process was incredible. The way that they treated me and my family, knowing that we were going through something pretty emotional. And then Dan also helped us find our new house that we currently live in, where we downsized. Our plan accelerated 2 years early because of the situation. And so not only did TGP help us sell our house, they helped us buy our new house. And after about 4 weeks of sitting around, contemplating what happened to me, like my life, I woke up one day and I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't sit around. And called Dan, told him I wanted to meet with him again, and kind of started the process. And I treated getting my real estate license like my full-time job. I would get up every morning. I'd go in the office at our house, and I'd take the classes to, get through the whatever we had to get through to get the license, but that became like my motivation. And as I started really getting involved in it, I started realizing like, this is actually pretty cool. Like I never thought I'd be learning about this stuff. I used to study football in the off seasons, like how to be a better coach or schematics or leadership, whatever. And now I'm learning stuff that I never thought I would learn. And so that was one of the biggest things is I made myself uncomfortable trying something new. And I didn't actually start the team until August of 2020. So I was unemployed from February 1st till August 10th of 2020. And I purposely waited, and the team kind of, we had to figure out the timing, but I knew that if I was going to do this, there was no turning back. Like it wasn't like a side hustle. This wasn't like a part-time deal for me. I have a wife and children that are counting on me. I'm not going to go in and half-ass it. Excuse my language. But so I wanted to make sure. And I had been offered other jobs. I've been offered other college jobs that would have involved me moving away from my wife and kids. And as much as I love football, and as much as football has been a huge part of my life, I don't love it that much to move away from my wife and kids.
So there's a saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? So do you think it was more difficult for you to kind of restart at your age? And if so, do you feel like you changed at all since switching careers?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a great question, and I'll never forget the conversation I had with my wife. Kind of halfway through my pity party, I think at one point she looked at me and she was like, so if you were talking to one of your players who was going through something, what would you tell him? What would you tell a player who was having a hard time? Like, what would you say? And I said, well, I used to use words like resilient, tough, mental and physical toughness, like all those things. And so I quickly realized that it was time for me to start practicing what I preached for so many years. It was a real challenge. It was a real challenge getting, in my mid-40s, changing careers, and going from a salaried employee where I never really knew how much money I made, but I just knew every 2 weeks there was going to be money deposited in there. It was conservative. It was comfortable, and to the world of now you run your own basically business. Myself, working for Troyce Gatewood Partners, but I'm my own employee. I work for me, and so there's the adjustment period. Not only just figuring out the financial piece of it, but also the fact that I was entering a career that I knew nothing about at the time. I mean, I took the classes online, but until I got here and got the training and started realizing, I quickly figured out there's so many similarities between teaching and coaching and being in real estate.
So what have you learned in your now, 3 years?
And going on year 3, yeah. No, it's 2.5. But yeah, going on, halfway through my third year, what have I learned? I've learned a lot. I've learned that anything's about myself.
What have you learned about yourself in the past 3 years?
Happiness is not defined by what's in a bank account. Happiness is defined by the people you surround yourself with every day and what you can do for other people, at least in my mind. I'm so much happier today than I was, obviously, when I was going through the transition, but even before that. I'm proud of myself for doing this, for getting outside of my comfort zone. I'm not completely comfortable with all the aspects of being a realtor yet, but I'm very comfortable to proudly say, this is what I do. I've learned that football, and I used to tell my players this all the time, football will never define me. It's a part of who I am, but it never defines me. And that's something that I really struggled with in my first year because everybody knew me as coach. Everyone calls me coach still. And I used to kind of put up the fence and the wall like, that's the old me.
I forget your name is Dave sometimes. Because we all call you Coach Max.
Yeah.
Even my son calls you Coach.
I know. And so once I started embracing that it's okay to be the real estate coach as opposed to the guy on the sidelines, that people will like you and trust you and be your friend because of the person you are, not because of what you did.
But in the same aspect, you're coaching your clients.
Yeah.
You're still coach, and that's okay.
Yeah, a lot of them call me coach because a lot of them do their homework. A lot of them go on our website and they look at, like, I had a guy call me the other day who was like, I was looking on the website. I didn't realize, and we started, of course, it all goes back to football, right? And once I embrace that football is a part of me and that can actually help me be really good at this part. And the other thing I really learned is obviously from a very young age, I knew I was competitive, but I also learned that it's okay to be good at one thing, be really good at it, and kind of take it to the highest levels that you possibly can. But you can also then turn around and be really good at something else. And that's where I am in this journey in real estate, is just trying to be really good at what I'm doing right now. Embracing what football did for me, embracing all the relationships and all the things that it brought me. But what I'm really trying to do now is I just want to be really good at my job, because my job now makes me feel good when I help people, just like being in the classroom, just like being on the sideline, just like being on the practice field.
Cool. So, do you have any tips or advice for anyone who's considering a career change late in life?
Well, frankly, I wouldn't recommend doing it in your late 40s, with kids that are going to college and all of that. Ripping the Band-Aid off and being real, there's financial implications when you are in a career for 20 plus years. There's things that sometimes when younger people, and my kids are getting ready to go through this, as they finish up college, when they go through stuff, you kind of bounce around for a couple years here and there to figure out like where you're going to fit. But then once you get that stability and then you get married and you have a family and all those other things, it's not just about you. So I wouldn't recommend changing careers unless you're absolutely completely miserable, but it's possible. And it's possible to find the same happiness that you had before, just doing something different.
So knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself 4 years ago? What would you tell yourself in 2020 at the pit of your
Yeah. That was the low of the low. There was a lot of highs and there was a lot of lows. What would I tell myself? You got me.
We didn't practice this.
No, we didn't practice this.
What advice would you give to someone?
Yeah, life's tough. Life's hard. And most of my life, the highway was smooth in 55, and then you hit those bumps. And when you put others in front of yourself, like I have a responsibility to my wife and kids. I have a responsibility to my kids so that when they go through tough times in their adult lives, they can say, well, I watched my dad who was really good at one thing, and he went through this tough time, and he came out on the other side much better because of it. Like I owe it to them. So I would probably tell myself that it's temporary. It's like sometimes I tell our clients it's a temporary suck, right? Like when you're moving a house, from house to house, it sucks. It's a temporary suck though, because it brings you joy when you get into, your new place. But I think I would tell myself, this is temporary as long as you want it to be.
Is real estate temporary?
No. Everywhere I go, especially, I have a really strong support system, not only at home, but my family, and I have a really strong group of what I would say like close friends. Like I got a squad, you know what I mean? And every time I'm outside that squad and I run into people, and again, 20 plus years, I know a lot of people, right? I get two questions. Within the first 5 minutes of a conversation with someone, how's real estate and when are you going back to coaching? I get it.
We're keeping him. He's not going back.
All the time. But the thing is like, it's not that I don't know if I'll ever coach again. I have no idea. I know I won't be a head coach and do all the things that I did for such a long time. I do miss it. I miss coaching kids. I miss like teaching kids how to a certain skill and then watching them excel at that skill. But like having the opportunity to do this, and people now understand like this isn't like a temporary like Band-Aid on something. This is who I am. This is what I do. That's why I wanted to do these videos. I mean, just people need to understand that like you're not defined by what happens to you in life. And I used to say it over and over and over and over again. And I finally had an opportunity to put my words into action, which is what I've tried to do.
I think you're a role model for a lot of people. I mean that genuinely, not just for the video.
Well, you know, when you're a teacher and a coach, there's a lot of eyes on you all the time, right? I've learned that in real estate, age doesn't matter. Like we work with some, our team is very diverse in ages, right? And that's the cool thing, is that I can learn something from the 20-something or Troyce, who's been in it for 20 plus years. Is that, when you're hungry and you're eager and you want to do a good job of something, you can learn from everybody. Whereas a lot of times when you're coaching, it's like, well, what does that first year coach know more than I do? I've been doing this 20 years, This is completely different. The environment that we're in is completely different.
I think you're doing a great job. Is there anything else you want to say, or you didn't, touch on? Do you feel like it's important to tell?
No, I think that again, this is more of personal stuff to do. It's very uncomfortable for me to talk about myself in this regard, to put this stuff out there, but at the same time, like, it's also part of the journey. It's good. Doing this is going to make me a better realtor, only because I'm growing and progressing, and not only personally but professionally, by having these conversations. Like I tell my clients all the time, they're like, "How long have you been in real estate?" And when I tell them less than 3 years, they kind of look at you, and then you tell the story. Like I was only going to work for one team. That was this team. If they didn't help sell our house and help us buy our new one, I wouldn't have done it. But I saw how they treated me. They treated my family, and it wasn't because there was dollars involved in it. There was money involved in it, but it was because they genuinely actually cared. And when they knew I was going through something, my family was going through something, that's when the team like took action and wanted to help me become better. So I'm pretty lucky.
That's awesome. We're lucky to have you.
Well, thanks. Now let's go party. All right.